Hokie Hangover starting on time, basically. Where we announced 10 p.m. on X, we put 10:05 on YouTube. So we appreciate everyone joining us tonight. You're going to get a little bit of a Miami preview. I'll be quite honest. I don't know how in depth this Miami preview is going to be, but joined here by the whole crew: myself, Mike, and Andrew. Michael, how are you?
Good.
Excellent. Andrew has rejoined us. He is back stateside. And not only is Andrew going to tell us how his trip to Spain was, he's going to give you his more detailed thoughts on James Franklin's hire.
Well, thank you, Ricky. I don't know how many details are necessary because I feel like it's been mulled over so many times by the many great members of our Virginia Tech media. But as for my trip, I don't think that's gone public yet. It was great. Spain, very cool country. Didn't pin Spain as like the number one place on my map of places to go over the years. Not going to lie. Like, take a look at me. You think that Spain is the place that I highlight as my life dream? No.
I'm going to leave that one alone.
Do you think it's the place that I would be most identified as a tourist? Yes. But either way, tremendous people, tremendous food. To go there for the first NFL game ever played, a real honor for me. And to be around so many fans of the football team from Washington and the Miami Dolphins fans who were very nice, and just the general Spanish people. It's amazing how many people in Europe love the NFL. Seriously, like walking down the street, having random Spanish people come up to you saying things like, I'm not even going to say them because of the racially charged nature of the team's former name, but apparently they still call them that there. But either way, I mean, a tremendous time. The stadium there was awesome. J.M. Tucker, former Virginia Tech student body president, the guy who came up with the idea for the trip, Frank Merritt, who many of our listeners will know just from association with the GOAT. Two great guys to go with. And we had a great time. It was the first time for me in Europe in over a decade since I was truly like a kid. Like a junior in high school was the last time I went. So I guess I needed a little more of walking down a cobblestone road and just aimlessly watching beautiful people walk past beautiful architecture to realize that maybe I'd been missing something with Europe. On the other side of things, the highlight of the trip being going on a tapas crawl and realizing halfway through the tapas crawl through a tad bit of inside information that the news that we're all smiling about was going to happen, and then it actually going down was, for me, something to behold. It's hard to put into words how well this thing went. I don't know if I said it on this podcast at any point. I know for a fact I said it on Inside the Tunnel through 247 when I think we did a 2-candidate overlook. We were planning on doing 4 candidates, and we spent like the first 40 minutes on Shane Beamer and put the last 20 minutes on Franklin right after he had gotten let go. And my reaction was essentially laughing at the idea. Like, why would this future Hall of Fame head coach, and by credentials, that's what he is, go to the school that just fired his best friend? I don't know if it's actually his best friend, but clearly very good friends.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jay Pearson, because I was wrong. I was dead wrong. And I was always skeptical of the idea of the committee just because from what I had heard in the beginning, it sounded like too many cooks in the kitchen to me, right? Like, you have too many conflicting voices, and
sounds like they kicked some of the cooks out. That's what it sounds like.
Well, it does exactly sound like that. But at the end of the day, they saw an opportunity, right, And they wouldn't let that opportunity walk away without saying yes. And credit to them and credit to Whit Babcock. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but Whit Babcock saying what he said in August laid the groundwork for allowing this to happen. And we can't look past the past transgressions of the guy that hired the last two football coaches. But without the Board of Visitors clearly wasn't doing anything before to fund hundreds of millions more dollars into the athletic department. And when they decided to do that, that put them in a position where you could show up at a guy like James Franklin's summer house. When I say a guy like James Franklin, that's almost a false statement, right? Because it is only James Franklin. Only James Franklin has those credentials and is available. To only James Franklin could you make that pitch. And they showed up at his house at that lake down in Georgia where all these football coaches like to go down and hang out with their families and play some really good golf, and said, here's the deal. Here's the opportunity. Please say yes. And you can listen to 2 weeks of podcasts to know that it wasn't a done deal right away. But by God, James Franklin is the next head coach of Virginia Tech. And I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the other details, but it is in a sport where hires can't be judged on paper, the best on paper hire you could really possibly imagine. So just like I'm sure everyone listening feels, and you could throw my two other co-hosts into that. I mean, I'm all smiles, man. I'm all smiles. The best part of the trip to Spain was realizing that James Franklin got hired and the celebration afterwards, because unlike you folks who were where it happened midday on a Monday work day, it happened to me at 10 p.m. at a bar in Spain with no work the next day. So celebrations were had. We'll say that much.
Yeah, so we obviously had the press conference on Wednesday, and I think we did learn quite a bit from that. And Andrew, you mentioned how it felt like there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this one, and that's probably a fair assessment of the search committee in the early portions. However, one of the things that came out in this press conference was that when James Franklin was dismissed from Penn State, Whit Babcock told us in the presser that the search committee voted unanimously that James Franklin was going to be the top coach. And from that point on, the entire effort of the search committee was, let's go get James Franklin. And throughout the press conference on Wednesday, the whole vibe I got is that everyone that's involved in Virginia Tech athletics, and even at the university leadership level, is all pulling in the same direction. Everyone is on board with spending this amount of money, making these kinds of investments, hiring this caliber of coach, and hopefully soon to be assistant coaches. And there's no second guessing, there's no questioning, there's no waffling on these decisions. They've made these decisions and they're moving forward. And I don't know that the university would have been able to make a decision like that even a couple years ago.
A couple months ago.
Yeah. I mean, and I told you guys, I think that all of this really starts with John Rakovich. The guy recently took over as rector at Virginia Tech. Since then, he requested Whit Babcock give a presentation on athletics funding. He got that presentation. He rallied the board to vote almost unanimously to approve the funding plan. He then was able to get together a pretty good cadre of folks to make this hire happen, including his embattled athletic director, a former defensive coordinator at the school that is still playing a big role, and then Tim Sands, who really hasn't been much involved in anything related to athletics during his tenure at Virginia Tech, and a couple other board members, and they were able to make this happen. And they were able to do that all within the span of just a couple months. That's pretty damn impressive, guys. And we can question a lot of the folks all we want. And Angie, you bring up a good point. There's no way to kind of wash away or cover up some of the issues that the university and the athletic department have had in the past as far as leadership is concerned. But this entire process was a huge win, start to finish.
I mean, I'll say, and then let Mike talk. Like, the effort that was put in from this group that was assembled for the search, whether it be Bruce Arians, Eddie Royal, whether it be Rakovich, Jay Pearson, many other names to mention.
Bud Foster talking to Franklin every day.
Bud Foster talking to Franklin every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the effort. I finally saw an effort that was put in on the part of the institution that reflected the effort that the fan base, with all its passion, that over the years, through thick and thin, and a hell of a lot more thin than thick, for that matter, deserves.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
It finally felt like they were taking it more seriously, or as seriously as the fan base would. Right? And that's amazing, given where we've come from, given where we were. And had Franklin ultimately ended up saying no, it would have been somewhat of a double entendre, because I still would have really respected that effort after the weeks that we went through, and after we learned that a non-disclosure agreement doesn't mean much when you have 10 people that signed it and pretty much everything got out relatively quickly. I would have respected the effort, and it would have been unfair to a Bob Chesney or whoever else was hired who those guys could go on and have perhaps greater success than James Franklin, for all we know, right? Like, no one knows the future. But a target that I literally laughed away, thinking that there was no chance, future college football Hall of Famer, is the head coach of Virginia Tech. And it was the right people in the right place at the right time for Virginia Tech, with, more importantly than anything else, when James Franklin talked about alignment, the right game plan, that level of alignment, which is essentially James Franklin saying, hey, I want to win. Here's how much money I need to win. Can you give me that money and let me do what I want? Sweet. All right, let's rock. But like, that's what we needed to do, and we did it. And here we are. And I have a decent amount of confidence that it's going to work out.
The alignment from we can talk about the money part in a second. The just alignment from the university and athletic department, like, forget even hiring James Franklin, just to get them aligned at all is just a gigantic accomplishment. Like, we haven't seen that. That's I couldn't have envisioned that at the beginning of this search. So yeah, Whit Babcock does deserve a lot of credit for this. James Franklin mentioned it. The committee members who were interviewed mentioned how integral, Whit was for this. And I don't know this for certain, but certainly feels like he saved his job if he wants to stick around.
He might have, and that's something that I did want to talk about at some point tonight, was how Whit's role really. What kind of role did Whit actually play in this process? As far as, was he more of just a process advisor for the committee and helping them get through step by step, or is he someone that's actually going to stick around and have a working relationship with James Franklin?
Yeah, which we'll see. I mean, certainly sounds like he played a larger part than a lot of people thought he was going to, in terms of he was communicating with agents and he was setting up the interviews, but he let the committee do the job that, they essentially put the committee together to do, which is discuss the pros and cons of the head coach. Yeah, he deserves a lot of credit. The whole alignment thing, getting the money together, a lot of the reason why I think we're seeing these donors commit large amounts of money to this is because it is James Franklin. Like, I want to make sure that everybody understands that, like, Bob Chesney was not going to get this type of NIL commitment from the donors. A lot of these donors were not going to commit large sum, not to say they wouldn't at all, but they would not commit what they are committing to James Franklin, to a Bob Chesney, to a Summerall, to, go down the list. This is James Franklin kind of brings that level of commitment with him. And this is a really serious football hire, right? Ricky and I talked about this the other night, Andrew, but this is the hire you make if you're actually going to be serious about competing in football long term. This is the type of hire you have to make. So I just think the alignment piece is really important, and then the monetary backing, right, to get this over the finish line, because a lot of this came down to whether or not James Franklin was going to be able to get the funding for NIL and building the roster that he was going to need. That was a lot of the battle right towards the end. That was pretty clear, and they got over that final hurdle. I thought what was most interesting was Jay Pearson and Bud Foster. They essentially facilitated this relationship with, and not only facilitated, but kind of built that relationship with Franklin throughout this entire process, right? And Bud reached out to him early on, saying, "Hey, we got a job that's open. We'd be interested, and talking to you." And it was pretty clear early that Franklin was interested in talking to Virginia Tech. And then for Pearson and Franklin to fly up there, I was listening to the athletic department put out like their level 7 show with Bill Roth, and he was interviewing all the board, a bunch of members of the committee, and Bud Foster, and Jay Pearson was on there. And Pearson mentioned that, that Friday night flight tracking saga a little over a week ago, or almost a week ago, I guess. He was talking about how he was going to change planes and make sure it wasn't going to be tracked. And he just said, "You know what? We're so late in the process. We have to get this over the finish line." He just literally picked up Bud in Blacksburg and was like, "All right, we're just going to go. And if we get flight tracked, we get flight tracked." He was to the point where, like, I don't even care. Chips in the middle of the table. Like, let's go and try to close this out. And they go up, they have dinner with James Franklin. If you guys haven't listened to that, I highly recommend you guys listening to that show, because the committee members got into kind of the ins and outs of actually getting Franklin to commit, which you don't always get during the search. But Pearson and Bud flew up there, which we knew, flew up there last Friday night, had dinner with Franklin, and got this thing across the finish line. And they got that monetary commitment that they needed for Franklin. And they got Franklin's commitment to Virginia Tech, right? And they dotted the I's, crossed the T's over the weekend, and got it done, right? The reason why it leaked to Thamel on College Game Day is because this thing was really close. We knew it had been close, but this thing was like really, really close.
You mean
by
it was
Saturday.
in the early stages, Michael?
Yeah, early stages of talks, and yeah, I think my whole point is everybody played their role, right? Rakovich played his role as rector. Witt put together a presentation of why, enhancing the funding into the athletic department was so important. Pearson and Bud with the relation, building and cultivating that relationship with Franklin. McCarthy dealing with all the lawyers. Like, it was just everybody kind of played a role, and they found a way to get this done. I still can't believe it a few days later. It's pretty shocking.
I think it's fair to assume that if Virginia Tech had followed a similar process to what they did when they hired Justin Fuente or Brent Pry, where the athletic director was in charge of the search, I don't think that this gets done. And that's not necessarily a knock on Witt, but this feels like a scenario which, like you said, Mike, John Rakovich put the right people in the right places. And he knew that somebody like Bud Foster was a really good option to make those overtures to James Franklin and build that relationship, because Bud and Franklin are going to be speaking the same language.
Yep. Coach to coach. And it was a busy, because of the people involved too, like Pierce is a business guy. Like this was the type, and the people who were involved that played the most important parts outside of Bud are business people. Like McCarthy dealing with the lawyers, Pearson talking directly with Franklin, and then Bud helping with the football piece of it too. You know what I mean? Everybody kind of played their role. This did feel like what you would do if you were trying to hire somebody in like high levels of business. That's what it felt like.
My fear at a time not too long ago, it's hard to remember now, but when we thought it was very much up in the air, which I don't think we'll ever know how much it was really up in the air. But I'm like, is this group of businessmen, right? And I mean, no offense to anyone on the committee, because you're all literally my hero at this point. We got James Franklin. But at the time, I was like, all right, so we got the board of directors to make the financial commitment. And then they asked themselves, who would be the best person to go ahead and make this hire? Oh, us. We appoint ourselves. And that seemed a little bit sketchy to me at the time. And I mean, I've known Jay Pearson for years, not extremely well, but I'm friends with his son, and I've hung out with him a few times, and he is an awesome dude, and he's one of the most successful people I have truly ever met in person. So I had some faith there. But you have a bunch of big, really successful guys, and they've never dealt with a Jimmy Sexton type before. And that gave me some level of unease. But exactly as you guys described, it seemed like it was almost the exact combination of people that are required to get the deal done. The guys with the business experience who were able to get the financial backing / provide it to some degree themselves. Bud Foster, and to a lesser extent, probably Eddie Royal, who could speak to the football side of things and the tradition in a language that would resonate with James Franklin. And then on the far end of things, Whit, the guy who has had conversations like this in a football hiring scenario before. And the stars aligned. But I want to ask you guys, because like I mentioned before, right? I laughed this off a little over a month ago on Inside the Tunnel. Because, again, my thought process was that if nothing else, Franklin wouldn't go where his boy just got fired. And now, as we learned at least 2 minutes into the press conference, when tears started getting shed by James Franklin, that Brent Pry might have actually played the most positive role in this search that no one ever could have possibly imagined. I mean, what do you guys think of that? And to parlay off of it, as we start thinking about staff and all that stuff, like, is there a chance? In fact, I'll eliminate the question of is there a chance that he'll ever be back? Because I think that if James Franklin is here for a decent amount of time, he probably will be back. But is there a chance he's back anytime soon, like this year or next year kind of deal?
I think for me, this was such a perfect storm of events that Franklin was not only available, but when you're pursuing him, if you're the administration at Virginia Tech, Brent Pry is a bit of a wild card in the process. But anyone that's learned anything about Brent Pry off the field, he's a pretty damn good guy. And Brent, even though he didn't spend a ton of time at Virginia Tech prior to his arrival, has always had a bit of a soft spot for this place and has had a soft spot for Bud Foster and Frank Beamer. I don't think that there was a chance in hell that Brent Pry was going to intentionally sabotage this process. Now, I firmly believe that Brent Pry was very honest with James and told him exactly what he thought from start to finish. And I don't think that Brent sugarcoated it. And that's actually something that Franklin talked about. There was a quote here from Franklin in the presser. The advantage, obviously, is that I'm able to call Brent Pry and he's able to tell me the truth. I don't really want anyone to sugarcoat it because none of these places are perfect. I'm not perfect. Let's just talk about the strengths. What are the advantages? What are the challenges? Brent was very, very transparent. And the fact that Brent didn't sabotage this process, the fact that Brent didn't go in there and say, this is a mess, you can't fix this, nobody can fix this. It's going to require a complete salting the earth to try and turn that place around. Virginia Tech got lucky in a sense, but I think it just is kind of an inside window into the kind of man that Brent Pry is and has been for quite a while.
Yeah. Man of integrity. It's never been about Pry the person. We've talked about that. It's never been about that. 3 of us interviewed him about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, I guess now. And he was great with us. And not a lot of people have bad things to say about Pry the person, right? It just didn't work out from a football coaching standpoint. It is interesting to me. I'm not surprised that Pry was honest with a very good friend of his about this job and didn't sabotage it. I think what's interesting is that Franklin is taking over, in some ways, a very different job than the one Brent Pry was fired from 2 months ago. Nowhere near this level of backing from a roster standpoint. We just talked about how other candidates would not have gotten, because they wouldn't have gotten this kind of money for NIL. Maybe they would have, Doris would have promised, obviously some money to help, infuse into the program, but nothing like this from a purely for NIL. No way. It's a different job that Franklin's walking into in that regard. So the things that Pry had to be honest with Franklin about, a lot of that has to do with people management. Who are you going to be dealing with on a daily basis? And to tie it back to the Whit Babcock conversation, I do wonder, right, from a Whit's future standpoint, Franklin's going to come in here and wants to know who his boss is. Who is he reporting to? Everybody ultimately reports up to Sands, right, as the president of the university, but who, is Whit going to be my boss? Is Whit going to be around? Franklin spoke very highly of Whit in the press conference yesterday. And I think that's pretty telling, right? The committee members spoke very highly of Whit. I think that's pretty telling. I'm interested to see what his future is, because I think that does impact, right? Pry had dealt one-on-one with Whit for over 3 years. And is that going to be Franklin's boss moving forward? It's a key question to answer here. So, yeah, big time for Pry, no doubt about it. Big time from Pry. Obviously played an instrumental role. Franklin says he wouldn't have been here without that input, insight, and it allowed Franklin to really ask some more honest questions of members of the committee and have an idea of what the level of commitment was going to be. So I think that's all important.
Yeah, I mean, just my hot take would be that James Franklin didn't come here to truly report to Whit Babcock. I think that James Franklin probably has a level of autonomy that is almost hard to comprehend. I think he was given the keys to the castle, and that only an epic amount of failure would require any intervention, right? Like, I mean, could you have we? I mean, and it's not anything that any of us would understand, but like, we want to pay you an exorbitant amount of money to then commit to you that we are going to give you this money to let you do your thing. Like, he is now certainly the highest paid employee in the Commonwealth of Virginia by a margin.
I was gonna say, Andrew, like to build on that, look no further than the question asked in the press conference yesterday during like the Q&A portion where I forget who asked it, Bitter or Teal, somebody asked about the general manager model and what that was going to look like. And Witt said it kind of just depends on what Franklin brings with him. Was essentially the answer. Yeah. Like who's he bringing? And we do have the answers to some of that, right? We've gotten some answers on that since then. Who he's going to bring to help essentially help him pick players around the roster. We've gotten some answers to that today. But that was the response from Witt. It was like, who's he bringing? Like, let's just see from the skill set standpoint who he's bringing with him, and that's going to dictate what that's going to look like. To your point, Andrew, about autonomy.
Yeah, I mean, and that was something, and I'll credit Teal because he said this on his podcast that he does with Tech Sideline. But apparently, when the search first came out, and it had been like leaked into College Game Day that Virginia Tech was looking to like hire the athletic director first, and then there was blowback on that end because that's not what Jimmy Sexton's clients want. They don't want a boss. Like, they don't want a general manager that's in charge of them. They want to pick the guy that's in charge of personnel, so they don't have to do as much work themselves as they would in the traditional model that we saw, even just 5 years ago. But no, they don't want a boss like that.
They don't want the Andrew Luck. They don't want the Andrew Luck at Stanford, Ron Rivera at Cal. They want the Mike Lombardi at North Carolina, who's reporting to Belichick. That's
exactly.
What they want.
The nail on the head, like. And I'm sure that if we had like stuck to our guns on that initial thought process, it wouldn't be James Franklin, and it probably wouldn't be Dan Millen either. Right? Like, in a world where college football coaching is so funny because, as we saw with none other than James Franklin, as we saw with Brian Kelly, as we've seen so many times over the years, you're a hot commodity coming in, and they want to get rid of you pretty easily. But when you're the hot commodity coming in, you have all kinds of leverage. All kinds of leverage. And I think there's been few situations where a candidate had more leverage than James Franklin had over Virginia Tech in these negotiations. But to James Franklin's point that he made during the press conference, when I forget who it was, but someone asked him, like, it's been a few months or it's been a few weeks. You took some time to reflect. What do you think, you would change about what you did at Penn State? And he said something along the lines of, and anyone can go back and look at the direct quote, so don't take this verbatim, but like, I look back at it and we're always willing to make adjustments. But what we've seen over the course of the last 15 years of being a head coach is that what I do works. And we win football games. So we're not gonna stray too far away from that because we lost a couple of bad games in a row. To hell, I respect that. Like,
yeah, I respect it too.
He's won a ton. Like, as I've said 4 times already on this podcast, if he retires tomorrow, he's probably in the College Football Hall of Fame based on the sheer accomplishments alone. He won more Big Ten games at Penn State than Joe Paterno. He is effectively Frank Beamer when you look at the resume. And we can get into the Penn State fans, and I know it's not all of them, but a lot of them are quick to kind of get angry at the happiness that Virginia Tech fans are experiencing, and I think that's a little bit weird. Like, I wouldn't get mad if like Tulsa hired Justin Fuente. I'd be like, that's probably a great fit for you guys. I think that's probably going to go pretty well because for different reasons, things might go better than others at various institutions with various standards. But yeah, I do think Franklin has the keys to the castle here in a way that hasn't been seen at Virginia Tech. And I'd be curious to see. It's going to be weird right? It is inherently weird because a lot of the people that are already here are here because James Franklin hired them at one point and Brent Pry brought them along in various roles. So the retention of the staff, maybe not the staff that we think about, in the top roles as much, but more so the guys in support roles behind the scenes might be less so on the chopping block because he has a certain level of trust for them. And we know this is a business that's all about relationships when it comes to this type of stuff. But to summarize in a way that I think a lot of people will be happy to hear, I don't think John Boleyn is calling the shots anymore. And metaphorically, when I heard him talk about calling Frank Beamer and asking him for his blessing, first of all, someone asked me, do you think he really did that? Or do you think he just did that to say that? I'm like, it was like the third thing he said in his press conference. Do I think that James Franklin has an utmost amount of respect for Frank Beamer? Yes, but obviously, if it was the third thing he said in the press conference, he knew he was going to say it in the press conference. Like, I don't think a guy like James Franklin, who is very aware of the media, because as I learned in the last 3 days, there's a lot of different, media, both traditional and independent, that covers Penn State. He doesn't do anything he doesn't say anything to the media unintentionally, but nonetheless, it felt to me like asking Frank Beamer for the blessing, which this might not have been what James meant, but it's almost like, all right, this is your program. You built a legacy, but I'm James effing Franklin, and now we're going to do things my way. And how contrary that is to a few years ago when all people wanted was some sort of rewind button where we could go back to the Beamer era. No, I don't think that's the case anymore, though. I think this fan base just wants wins. And James Franklin might be the best opportunity to provide that. We shall see, though.
Sure seems like it. There was another part in here that a quote that I pulled from the presser that I thought was really indicative of the kind of the entire encompassing thing that James Franklin is trying to do here. And he was talking about recruiting, and here's the full quote. These young men that we're going to be recruiting, they're going to be recruited from all the top programs in the country. They need to walk into Virginia Tech football, and it needs to look, feel, smell, and operate like big time. Every aspect of it, how we make them feel when they come in the building, how important they are to what we're trying to do. When they walk around our facilities and they see the stadium, they see the indoor facility, and also when they get inside the football facility, it needs to look, feel, and operate like a big time program because they're visiting all these other places. And the reality is it's not what you have because everybody has it. What stands out is the things you're lacking. And this is something that Tech has been criticized for a while now, which is operating like a mom and pop shop in just about every facet of the athletic department, whether it be in fundraising, coaching, facilities, recruiting. Tech has never been accused of operating like a Fortune 500 company. That's reserved for programs like Georgia and Ohio State and Alabama. Franklin, I think, knows based on his experience recruiting against Virginia Tech, but also probably his conversations with Pry, that Virginia Tech is not a big time program when it comes to these things. And there are changes that need to be made in terms of staffing, presentation, facilities, visuals, strategy, all of which are things that he was doing at Penn State that Virginia Tech is not doing. And to me, this felt kind of like a microcosm of what James Franklin is trying to do, which is get Virginia Tech to operate like an elite level program. And the whole recruiting aspect of it, and recruiting like you are a big time school, is just part of that.
I mean, this hire's made before Miami weekend. Franklin obviously was wasting no time contacting a bunch of players that he had recruited to Penn State or that had already been committed to Penn State.
Yeah.
And he's going to flip a bunch of them this weekend. It's pretty safe to say based on just reading the tea leaves, and all your buddies at VT Scoop, Andrew, have been all over it. Seems like there's going to be a lot of action this weekend down in Blacksburg. So he's wasting no time from that standpoint. I mean, he's got money to spend on the roster, right? I mean, he's got money to spend on the roster. A lot of these guys committed to him at Penn State. He gets fired. They, whether officially or unofficially, kind of open their commitment back up. They're taking official visits elsewhere. They're going to come down to a big game at Lane on Saturday. And, you know, I think that Franklin's trying to hit the ground running. I don't see any reason why he can't. Now, as far as the infrastructure, building out a recruiting staff, all that stuff, he's got money to do whatever he wants. Like, he really does. It's kind of hard to really put into words there, right? But he's got money to do essentially whatever he needs to do. And that has not been the case at Virginia Tech in this NIL era. So this is the first time we're going to get a taste of this is going to be this has a chance to be a really, really good roster next year quickly because he's got money to spend. I know he's coming in at a weird time from a recruiting high school kid standpoint because signing day is right around the corner, but they're going to hit the portal hard. They're going to be competitive with a lot of players that they may not have gotten in the door with in years past. So there's no reason to think once the dust settles that he can't have some success in his first year, you know. But he's moving quickly to flip this roster, and I think it's important to note how fast he's just reached out to all these recruits. I mean, that is what he does, right? That is what he is, a recruiter, and he's like very hands-on with it too, which is what I think everybody thought we were getting out of Pry when he got here, right? Because Pry came off of Franklin's staff, was used to recruiting, had some success early. It was clear he was more hands-on than the last guy for sure, right, in Fuente, but this is a whole different animal. So, yeah, I think a lot of operational stuff is going to be overhauled, probably for the better.
It's important to note, too, guys, that the transfer window has been moved for this year, and it starts January 2nd. So by the time the season ends at the end of November, he's going to have a fair amount of time to evaluate this roster and figure out exactly what his needs are in the transfer portal. It's not going to feel quite as rushed as in years past where the portal was operating in mid to late December. He's going to have some additional time here to try and figure things out, which will go a long way when he's trying to figure out how he's going to be spending whatever this number is going to end up being. I've seen some folks say it's going to be a $30 million roster, which is comparable to what Texas Tech did this year, which is why Texas Tech is now trying to be on the brink of making a college football playoff. It seems like Franklin is going to have pretty close to that for his roster.
I mean, money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a boat, right? And it can buy you a truck to pull it. And it certainly doesn't solve all your problems, but it's a good place to start. And James Franklin wouldn't be here if that commitment wasn't made. And that's the reality of the situation, right? I think I saw a quote from Jay Pearson earlier today where Pearson said that Franklin said, like, you know, all these people are telling me we'll give you whatever you want. And Franklin said, I want to know that you already have it. And that's what Virginia Tech had. And that was the advantage of what Babcock's presentation back in late July, early August, whatever the heck that was at this point, which feels like an eternity ago, by the way. Like 6 months can go by so fast. But Tech's had their ducks in a row. And grateful that they did, because they were able to go to James Franklin and say, here's what we can give you. The commitment's already been made. the vote's been made by the board and we're good to go, despite that one woman who is just wants me to be sad for the rest of my life, apparently. But, that's neither here nor there. But it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. Because I think James Franklin's really made a name for himself as he mentioned that he wants to do with Tech in the press conference, a guy that can command the room when he walks into a high school. And I think that anyone who watched the press conference understands how that man can command a room. I mean, he is a really, really, really compelling figure. And, you see just online the amount of joy, effectively, that his former players and staff have for him as he walks into this new role at a completely different institution than the one that they wore on their chest and the one that they'll go back for alumni days and where their numbers will be retired for the ones that were really good. It says something about the guy. And, it's kind of the internal argument that they're having at Penn State. Like, to what degree was this a cult of personality? And to what degree did he benefit off of Penn State? Right. And we're certainly going to find out, because I'm not here to diminish the Penn State brand. I think that Penn State's got a great brand for football. They got a stadium full of 100,000 people, clearly very passionate fans. And they've done it for a long time. But when you're recruiting at this level, right, and if I'm offering you $700,000 and my rival's offering you $730,000, but if my rival has a more compelling argument as to why coming and playing for me is going to make you a better man and have a better argument to make the NFL, my rival might win. At any point, this is a long-term investment in yourself. So I know how well Franklin did on the high school trail in the way that he built that program. Not so sure about the transfer portal. But what I do know is that he has a roster full of players that currently have been playing for Penn State that are probably pretty high-level players, especially maybe not compared to some of the starters in Ohio State, where they, you can go to any Wikipedia page for the Ohio State roster and click on the lineup because they're all in the NFL now. But compared to the lineup for Pitt, I think that those guys might be pretty good. So it'll be really interesting to see what moves are made, not just pulling guys from the current Penn State class, but pulling guys from the current Penn State roster. And then guys that he recruited at Penn State that may have ended up at other spots, like an Ohio State, like a Michigan, fill in the blank top tier school, where they're not getting the playing time. And James Franklin, who we don't know what moves have been made behind the scenes, but we can see what's happened on the high school trail immediately. We'll see in January who James Franklin might have a leg up on from that period of time where he had a month to call whoever he wanted because he wasn't employed by any school. And that's not tampering.
Yeah, he was making a lot of phone calls, from what I've been told, to a lot of different recruits, even like a week plus before he took this job. So he's certainly been massaging the phone lines. Before we get to the picks really quick, I want to make one point. Andrew, you talked about the whole cult of personality that Franklin kind of had at Penn State, and kind of how much of that was Penn State's brand, how much of that was him. And here's a quote or a comment from Brandon Sink saying Franklin puts Virginia Tech back on the map. It's important to note, guys, that after this press conference, Franklin immediately did Pat McAfee, immediately did SportsCenter, right off the rip. There's not a single hire in this coaching cycle that Virginia Tech could have made that would have gotten Virginia Tech that kind of publicity, front and center attention than James Franklin. And I have a feeling that that's going to be a consistent part of this process, where Franklin is going to have that access to the national media to be able to get Virginia Tech out in front of all of these different recruits and players and donors, where some other coaches may not have had that kind of access.
I mean, 100%. He's the biggest mover, the biggest shaker that was out there on the market.
Yeah.
He could have done this for LSU, though there probably would have been more questions, because the fundamental difference is that we know why James Franklin was fired at Penn State, because he couldn't win the big game, because he couldn't meet their expectations when there was that large roadblock that was their immediate in-conference competition. But for Virginia Tech, like, we just want to be good again. Like, we just want to win some games. And James Franklin provides that opportunity smack dab in the region where you could probably blame James Franklin in a lot of senses for Virginia Tech's decline, because think about the exact moment when the Beamer era started going south, right around 2014, when certain other schools started swiping up the top recruits in Virginia. Now, that wasn't all James Franklin, and I'm not saying that James Franklin is the be all end all solution to it, because at the end of the day, like, if I'm a top 100 running back out of Fairfax and Ohio State comes calling, they have a lot of seriously good evidence and finances to back it up in this day and age to make that argument, right? But
yeah, and it's the one last thing too is, like, Franklin's record against top competition being what it is, and then you look at who he's lost to, and I was just going to ask you to bring this comment up. Ryan Day's 1-4 against Michigan. Kirby's 1-7 against Bama. There are coaches that run up against an Ohio State and against Michigan under Harbaugh. There are a lot of teams who couldn't beat him, right? And a lot of those losses came against those two schools for Penn State. That's where a lot of the losses came. You had a random Iowa in there. You had Notre Dame in the playoff last year. But it's a lot of Michigan. It's a lot of Ohio State. That doesn't excuse it away. But like Andrew said, and Ricky, like you and I talked about the other night, it's a matter of getting to the point where that matters.
Yep.
Let's start with that. Let's get to the point where that becomes an issue to us too.
Yeah.
I would love for that to be an issue for us. That would be I would love for that to be in it. Like, let's get to the point where we can complain about that.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
I mean, right? And in college football, especially over the course of the last 20 years, I mean, it's honestly very similar to the NFL, right? There's a lot of quarterbacks that could have won Super Bowls had Tom Brady not existed. I mean, Peyton Manning, arguably a better quarterback, didn't win more than 2, and the second one was not really because of him, because Tom Brady existed, right? College football. Think about if you had just taken Nick Saban out of the equation, what would that have looked like? Now we're in this playoff era. And all I can tell you is that if the playoff had been played a bajillion times, right? If the playoff had been a 12-team playoff the entire time, Franklin's in it every time. And Penn State is a great football program. It was not the place that you necessarily wanted to be the day that James Franklin took it over. And he turned that thing around really quickly.
Yep.
And as he, I'm sure, very intentionally messaged in his press conference, the first year that they were off sanctions, they won the Big Ten. Now, that was a long time ago. That was the same year that Justin Fuente was a few extra minutes on the clock away from beating Clemson in the ACC championship. But it gives us all reason to believe that this guy should win at Virginia Tech. With Brent Pry, you were hoping beyond, like, oh, maybe it will work out. With Justin Fuente, there was reason to believe that he could be the guy. But most college football hires, because guys with the resume of James Franklin don't tend to float out there very often. It's not should. Like you don't just say like maybe we're the problem if this guy doesn't win.
Well, I don't know that we really need to preview much of this Miami game. We can say a quick bit about it once we get to it in our picks, but let's go ahead and get started with these picks. First up, Friday night game, Florida State's going to Raleigh. Florida State is a 6.5-point favorite on the road against NC State. Mike, who you got?
How do I feel about this game? I think the Noles win. It is in Raleigh.
7.5.
It is in Raleigh. It is at night. I do think Florida State went. I mean, NC State, it's senior day. You know, maybe senior night. Maybe they'll play hard and keep it competitive. I think Florida State wins and covers here, though.
All right, Andrew.
Florida State? I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one.
That's what I'm running with. Yeah. Rapid fire here. LSU at SMU, or excuse me, Louisville at SMU. Jesus. Cards are 2.5-point dogs to SMU. Mike.
Oh, man. You say rapid fire, then I look at this and get nervous. I'm going to go with SMU, I think.
Andrew.
Give me Louisville, even though I don't think they're that good.
I'm putting LSU down. Just kidding. I also have SMU. Delaware, Blue Hens on the road at Wake Forest. Wake 17.5-point favorites. Andrew, you first.
Bowl eligible Wake. Who would have thought going into the season? I am going to take. Look, I can't not do it because they're the only time they're going to come up. I'm rolling with producer Scott and the Blue Hens of Delaware in this game. Let's go.
Roll Hens, baby. My grandfather was the Dean of Agriculture at the University of Delaware. Fun fact, my dad is from Newark, Delaware, which is like right around the corner from where Scott grew up. So,
yeah, give me the Hens. Syracuse is signing up to get murdered this week. Notre Dame 35.5-point favorites at home. I'll take Notre Dame to cover here.
Lay 'em.
We've been universal this entire time, so I'll fade you guys. Syracuse. Go Orange.
Duke on the road.
Uh-oh.
Here, I'll do it. Duke on the road, a 6.5-point favorite at Carolina. Everyone knows who I'm going to pick. Let's go Duke.
I think Carolina covers. Duke wins.
All right. Ricky is still frozen. We do not have a spread for Furman versus Clemson. It is Pitt at Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets in Mike, is this a do or die game in the ACC? Is the team that loses eliminated here?
Trying to bring Ricky back into the stream. There he is.
I don't know what happened. Where are we at, boys?
Duke, Carolina. Who'd you pick?
I have Carolina. Who did you guys have?
I had Carolina as well. Andrew took Duke.
Manny Diaz, former future Virginia Tech head coach. We are on to Pitt, Georgia Tech, though. It seemed like that was the direction it was going at one point. Just saying. But yeah, Pitt, Georgia Tech, 2.5-point favorites at home in a big ACC matchup that very well might decide who makes the championship.
Yeah, I'm taking Georgia Tech here.
They should be fine.
Win your clunkers, right?
They should be fine. But I'll tell you what, man. Georgia Tech's defense has not looked particularly good lately. So, yeah. Give me the Jackets.
Are we clean sweeping here with Georgia Tech?
I mean, the fight in Pat Narduzzi's are all right. And Georgia Tech's lost to NC State, played a really competitive one with Boston College, and should have lost to Wake Forest. But I'll roll with you guys. Give me Georgia Tech.
All aboard the Ramblin' Wreck. Is this the big game? Cal Stanford? Is that what they call this?
The band is on the field, Rick.
Yes. I hope that the band is on the field because that would be the most entertaining thing anyone would see if they tuned in for this game. Cal is 3.5-point favorites on the road. Still not buying the Cardinal. They can't wait for this season to be over. Neither can Frank Reich. Give me the Golden Bears.
Frank Reich must be sick of having to report to Andrew Luck.
Yes.
That must really suck. Cal.
I will take Cal as well in a game that displays that getting to 7 wins really shouldn't be that hard when Cal wins this game and they get to 7 wins. Like, come on. Can James Franklin not win 8 next year?
We'll see. Very little differentiation between us, so let's see how this one goes. Virginia Tech, senior day, at home against Miami. Hurricanes, 18.5-point favorites here. Canes are technically still fighting for a playoff berth, although I have a feeling that they're probably going to find themselves out of the running. Look, Tech's wearing the Hokie Stone jerseys. I'm not a big believer in Carson Beck. I think Tech can keep this within 18.5. Knowing that it'll probably be a backdoor cover like it is every time I pick Virginia Tech against the points. So, yeah, give me the Hokies. Why not?
Yeah, sure. 18.5 is a ton. But, yeah, Hokies. Why not? Let the good times roll this week. You know?
Me and Mike have picked every single game the same up to this point.
Good. That's why
that means we're
where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, for the record, the only one on this podcast that is above 500 in picks so far this year is that gentleman in the bottom right of the screen.
Yep. Hey, I'll tell you this. Miami has looked like a college football playoff team in all the games other than the ones that they've lost. I mean, when they win, they've been taking care of business. I expect that to happen again. I think that the jolt of energy that the fan base has experienced from James Franklin being hired probably is not felt by the players that realize that they are not going to be on the roster next year. That's just reality. All good. We just got to have a good Enter Sandman for the recruits. And I trust everyone listening to this podcast who plans on attending the game to make that happen. But yeah, I think Miami's going to crush us. It's very unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. Would not shock me.
Yeah, Andrew takes Miami really quick. Counts Family Pharmacy in Blacksburg, home field apparel. Thank you for your support all year. We genuinely appreciate you. If you're in Blacksburg, get tickets to the game and go. Virginia Tech needs a good turnout on Saturday. Rain is supposed to go away in the morning. Should be perfectly beautiful during game time on Saturday. We'll be back at some point this weekend to get you guys a recap. And we'll talk about recruits. We'll talk about the game. We'll talk about Franklin. Until then, folks, go Hokies.